A content creator on TikTok reached out to me and asked me about a scenario that was brought up by one of their viewers. The viewer said that they were afraid of being left stranded in an urban environment, and in order to get home they'd have to cross a significant body of water. I thought that was an interesting scenario to discuss because I'm sure she's not the only one facing this, and that's what we're going to talk about today. SHTF across a body of water. Here's the scenario I was presented, with some things to consider. The individual who asked lives in a rural area and has to traverse a bridge to get to their work in a small city in the middle of the country. This individual was concerned either by accident, a natural disaster, or some other malady that bridge or bridges would go down, and they would have to find a way to make their way home eventually. The other assumption was that the river is relatively slow moving and is relatively quite wide, but not very fast. They also thought that it's possible that the National Guard or authorities would try to shut down the bridge to prevent or control the flow of people in and out of the area. This is what we were given to work with. So let's talk about what to consider. If you're in an urban environment, the traffic, the people, for the most part, come from out of the area into the work area. Keep in mind, during 9/11, when the bridges were shut down, several million people who did not live on the island of Manhattan were now stuck there for an extended period. That was one of the first modern SHTFs in an urban environment with a river crossing that many of us had seen. A lot of things to consider, including the weather, the temperature, and the flow of the water. First, let's cover some of the dangers we need to take into account. Obviously, the depth of the water isn't very relevant. You're either swimming or floating or you're drowning. However, the width of the river, the speed of the flow, is there debris or contamination, and of course, are there hostile people or animals in the water? The very first step is to plan ahead. Get familiar with the topography, the area, the various chances of crossing in different places, as well as if your company or the community has an emergency plan to account for evacuating people across the body of water. Most companies, at least the larger ones, will have an emergency response plan. Get familiar ahead of time, and if necessary, bike around or drive around on your days off to see other options for ingress and egress. Keep in mind, the majority of the people walking up and down the city are looking at their cell phones. They will not start thinking about how the heck to get out of the city or get back home or across the water until it's right in their face. At this point, you've gone over the area. You should be familiar with the topography. You should be familiar with the city, as well as your company and or community plans to evacuate or transport people across the body of water. Regardless of whether the bridge has been destroyed, if it's been taken over by some hostile force, or if it's shut down by the authorities to control the flow of equipment and personnel back and forth, you may be stuck where you are for an extended period of time. Keep in mind, you may not be able to drive home even if there is a bridge. You may have to go on foot. Your bag should account for the fact that you may need food, you may need cash, and you may be exposed to the elements. A basic bag I cover in another video. Actually, I have several videos that cover different types of bags. But in general, they should all include multi-tools, safety glasses, a safety mask in case there's smoke or debris in the air, as well as ponchos, maybe even a change of clothes, work gloves, basic medicines, a first aid kit, and if necessary, water or a container or bladder in which to carry water. Keep in mind, water may get contaminated in an emergency. You should also have a Silcock key. That's a four-cornered key. It kind of looks like a metal X, and it has different ratchets on each end that you can use to open municipal spigots to obtain water if you need to. You may need to filter or purify that water, so keep that in mind. One thing you definitely need to take into account is a flashlight in case power goes out during the emergency, and defensive items. Now, depending on where you live, you may or may not be allowed to carry certain items, so try to be compliant with your local laws. Understand if you choose to carry something that may be illegal, even though it may be a great idea, you also expose yourself to the risk of being caught by authorities and jailed or otherwise confined because you had this illegal item. So you have to weigh the pros and cons. The bag should not be excessively heavy. Again, you're trying to get home, you're not trying to go across the country. It should be light enough for you to be able to run reasonably fast and at the same time carry what you need. Make sure you also bring some food. In this small video clip, I have a couple of very cut down MREs, but even trail mix, beef jerky, anything that will last without refrigerations that can stay in your vehicle or in your bag in your office would be a great idea. Keep in mind, we may find yourself in a situation that you didn't plan for and you may be lacking something. Don't panic. Try to find where you can obtain that item and add it to your kit. Again, if you have your own office where you can lock things either in a locker, a drawer, or a closet, you can pre-stage stuff in your office in the event there's an emergency. I also highly encourage you to walk out of your building every now and then. Literally take the stairs out, not the elevator, so you get familiar with where the stairs exit, how to get to them, and if any doors are stuck or require a pass card. You don't want to try and evacuate a building and you can't exit the door and now you're stuck in a stairwell. I promise you the first responders will have enough on their plate. It may be a while before they come for you. You also may want to get familiar with water sources while you're doing that. Again, as preppers, we try to be ready for everything, but we're going to miss stuff every now and then. I mean, we're only human. Get familiar with where you can find basic things such as groceries, sodas, medicines, anything else you may need, because the stores will start looking like they did during the Rona, as you can see in this picture, if you're not quick on your feet. The minute you think something may be going on, take that cash that you had in your bag and find what you need. And then start assessing your options. If you can make it to your car, great. But as you can see by this guy, that wasn't an option. I'm sure by the time they got out of their building, the water from the breach had already flooded the car. He could still get his bag out, but that's about it. So keep in mind, you may have to be on foot for quite a while. So a change of shoes from formal shoes or high heels to hiking boots or sneakers may be a really smart decision to do in advance. Of course, mass transit could be an option. If the authorities and the municipalities can keep the trains and ferries running, great, but don't count on it. And you definitely don't want to get caught, so if you have to take a subway or a train, make sure your bag is with you. In case you get stopped in the tunnels, you can get out. Keep in mind, a lot of municipalities have golf courses, bike tracks, and other amenities. You might find some extra transport, but keep in mind, if people can't drive and they see you zooming around in one of these buggies, you may attract a lot of attention. And that brings me to my next subject. Try to stay gray until you get a handle of the situation. When I say stay gray, you want to blend into the background. Notice this guy here in the video clip has his bag. He's kind of going off the beaten path. Now this can backfire in that if you're not careful, you could wind up trapped between some bad dudes. But in general, keeping off the main roads may be a good idea. Whether you're driving or on foot, keep in mind the streets may clear out very quickly. People may hunker down, stores may start to board up. You don't want to be caught in the open if you can avoid it. Eventually, the authorities will have to try to restore order. That usually comes in a very heavy-handed response. So you want to be a person that nobody notices. You don't attract the bad guys, nor do you attract the police. You should just be another unfortunate person trying to make their way home. I promise you it'll save you a lot of stress thinking like that than getting in their face. What you don't want to have happen is you catch yourself in this kind of situation. People are violent, they're lashing out at the people around them, and if you're not part of a group, you may get chased down the street. You may need to take a temporary shelter, and there are a lot of reasons to do that. It could be violent, you could be lost. It could just be dark and you don't want to get hit by a semi or a police car. The weather could change. There could be contamination if it's a chemical leak or a terror attack. You may need to be able to make the decision to get your bike or yourself off the road and hide somewhere. If you do choose to hide in an abandoned building, which is a perfectly legitimate idea, one, make sure it provides at least adequate protection from the rain, snow, wind, or contamination. I'd also do what these two folks are doing and use your flashlight to look around the floor. One, you want to see if there's anything useful down there because you never know what people have dropped. But you also want to look for dangerous things, whether it's a snake, sharp objects like rebar or used drug needles, or just something that is unstable that if you stand on it you can fall through or be injured by a falling object. Don't just check the floor, look above you for any loose roof items, and make sure you keep away. You don't need an injury in a situation. That homework you did in the planning phase should be paying off right now. You should have by now identified several ways to get back if your main path over the bridge or ferry boat has been compromised. Start checking those options to see what's available. You might look out and find a footbridge or maybe a dam. Even if it's slightly underwater, you can still walk across without risking having to swim and maybe even losing your gear on the way across the river or the body of water. Look for objects such as alligators, snakes, downed power line, or other debris that could hang you up, cut you, injure you, or get your gear hung up and you'll have to lose your gear in order to survive. That's not a choice you want to have to make. Keep in mind you don't want to get an open wound in this kind of water because you don't know what's in it, and more than likely that injury will be infected within the week. So be prepared for that if you do get an open wound. If you have someone to travel with, make those plans in advance. Have a place you're going to meet, much like you would for a home fire. Find your friends and teammates and then start patrolling the options. You could also split up, check multiple locations at once, and get back together after the fact. God's willing, your homework and your preparation paid off. You made it home and you found your family or your loved ones. Keep in mind, if the power's out or if law enforcement's otherwise contained, you may see an increase in crime. Be prepared to hide or hunker down at home or wherever your meeting place is. Also, remember that some members of your family may be traumatized by what they just saw or things they witnessed. You're going to have to deal with that and keep them focused so that you guys can persevere and get through these challenges. The most important thing to do now is to plan. Sit with the ones you love, your friends, colleagues, whoever it is that you feel you can trust, and start making those preparations today so that if and when it happens, you'll be ready, you'll have a plan, and you can succeed. Godspeed, and I'll see you later.